How's it going, you guys? It's Scott with Everyday Shed, and today I want to walk you through how to build a ramp for your storage shed. Now, this is a kit from Home Depot. It's 8 foot by 12 foot, but this same process is going to pertain to pretty much any storage shed you have. Now, specifically what I'm dealing with is about 8 or 9 inches of rise right here at the entrance of the shed. And I want to make that a nice smooth transition so any lawn mowers, whether it's a push mower or a rider or a four-wheeler or a dirt bike or whatever it is, makes it that much easier to get into your storage shed. And there are several ways to do this, but I'll show you a few tips and tricks that will make it so your cuts are correct and you're not having to calculate any fancy angles while building out your ramp. So let's jump into it, and before cutting any wood, let's go ahead and prepare this ground a little bit, which will make for a better base for the end of our ramp. So first up, I'm just going to use some marking paint to give the overall outline of where I want to dig. That's just the opening of the doors, which is 64 inches, and then 48 inches away from the shed, which is the overall length of the ramp. I do have some high spots here where I'm digging right now, so I got to dig that down a little bit more. And what I'm trying to do is get roughly a level surface here, which will be the overall width of the boards that will sit on the ground. But specifically, I don't want the boards to sit on the ground. I want them to sit on a gravel base, and then that will help overall to keep moisture away. So I'll just check the height here. Everything looks good, and then that's where I'm just gonna get some white rock and start to fill that in after compacting the soil down here. Checking again, we're good. So now we'll just put some of that gravel in. And if you guys need a reference, you'll see a link in the description, and that has all the materials over at Home Depot that I use. You don't have to go to Home Depot, but it'll just be a good reference for you to build out your materials list. So compacting that down, I will check, everything is good. And now I'll just measure out 64 inches for our ledger board, cut that out, and then temporarily place this 1.5 inches below the floor to make so the doors would not interfere with the ramp once it's installed. All right, so here's where people, I think, get a little intimidated, because technically you could go the approach where you're calculating angles and you're taking something like a speed square, you're pivoting it on your 2x4, which is the main kind of joist or structure, and then you're getting the correct angle because you calculated that, and then marking that angle, and that's your cut line. So that's going to be using your run and your rise, and then things like inverse tangent to calculate that angle. But we don't have to do that. We can basically just use our ledger board, a board cut to 48 inches. So this is already cut to 48 inches, and then just a scrap 2x4. So what you'd want to do here is I would offset this a little bit because I don't want to overhang too much, as I want to get as much of the run of the 48 inches as I can off of this, because this is going to be cut as one of our structural members, but also a template for the other 4 that I'll cut. So I'll have 5 total across the 64 inches here of our ledger board. And then each of my ends, I'll show you how I'll offset those a little bit. So we'll take that scrap piece on this backside and we'll just lay it against the ledger board. But then that gives us a marking surface where we can go ahead and make our mark, which is going to be the angle that we need to cut. So now we have the angle. Once we cut that, then this would be on our ledger board. We'll remove the ledger board and secure everything up. So that's giving my angle right there. So I'll set that back in place, because there's a second cut that we need to make, and that's down here. But again, assuming that your gravel is level, so you might need to grab yourself a torpedo level, just confirm that you're close here. If you need to compact down a little bit more, do that now. And then you'll take this scrap piece, kind of move it out to the edge, so the top surface of that scrap piece is at the top corner here of your 48-inch length that we're getting our marks on. Then once you have that lined up, we'll just go ahead and mark our cut line here right along the top of the scrap piece of wood. So why this works is because once we do that cut line, that's going to drop it down 3.5 inches to the surface. But don't forget, we are the thickness of the ledger board right now up from this surface. So this is also going to drop down. So they're both dropping down 3.5 inches. Now, this is a kit and it has floor joists of 2x4s. That's why I'm matching it with 2x4s here. You might want to do 2x6s, but that's going to be up to you. Just make sure on this bottom side you're using a 2x6 instead of 2x4, because then both of those are going to be dropping down the thickness of the 2x6 opposed to our 2x4 here. So now I'll go ahead and cut this out, use it as a template for 4 more of those, remove this ledger board and then tie all those together, lay it out, and then make any adjustments to this gravel pad here if I need to level that out to make sure everything's in contact. And then we'll tie it all together and start putting either our deck boards or our 2x4s on the top. So I have this first cut, which is our angle at the ledger board. So you'll cut that out, and then the second cut is the much longer cut, which will be against the gravel. And then once you get this, you can use it as a template to cut out your 4 additional boards that you'll need. And then that's what's going to really give you the structure in addition to the ledger board. Now with all 5 of those cut, I have my ledger board off the shed and I'm marking my spacing. I'm 15-inch on center spaced, and that is coming in 2 inches from each side. So right in the middle at 32 inches because the ledger board's 64 wide, and then going out 15 inches from there. I'm going to place 3 structural screws at each of these locations, pre-place those, so then when I'm ready to start sinking into each of these joists, it's easy to just go ahead and make sure they're all lined, use my square, line things up, and then drive all 3 of those home to get everything secured. Then I'll go ahead and take that, and I want to start to fit things up before we put all of the top boards on and get everything secured. So we'll just temporarily secure that again 1.5 inches down, so you can see that's offset. That gives us room for 2x4s on top, where then the doors will not interfere with the ramp. So you want to use your 4-foot level and kind of check things out. What I'm starting to see is I do have some interference with the ground, and again, I want to keep these boards off the ground, so I need to do a little digging and adjusting, and I will end up taking this whole unit off again, and so I'll have a little bit more clearance, but I just want to check my levels right now to make sure everything's good. Now once it looks good, then I'll go ahead and secure 1 board. So I'm just securing the first board here. I am offsetting it from the absolute bottom by 1 inch, and then I'll sink 2 screws. Remember, you don't have much thickness of your joist here, so you got to angle those screws to get them to actually hold. And what I'm doing here is I have the markings, the same 15-inch on-center markings on this last board, so then that will make sure my spacing is correct all the way along the 4-foot run of this ramp. And then finally, I'll just take an oscillating tool and just trim off that 1-inch very thin piece that would eventually just break off from each of these joists. Now when it comes to fasteners, you have some choices. A little more on the expensive end would be structural screws. These are 3 inchers. That is tying the joist to the ledger board, and then also I'll be taking it through the ledger board into the joist of the floor system onto the shed. So that'll be tying those together. A little bit cheaper route, a little bit more manual labor would be to get these 16Ds 3.5 inch. That could then, again, basically serve both purposes, and then you'd just be doing hammer and nails. The cost is going to be considerably cheaper. Look below the video in the description and you'll see a link that will bring you over to Home Depot, and it fills your cart with all of these different fasteners, lumber, gravel, and any other supplies we use. And then for those top boards, the 2x4s, I'm just using 2.5-inch standard deck screws to secure those in. So now I'll remove those 2 structural screws for the ledger board so I can remove the overall ramp. I can dig down where I had a little bit of interference on each of those joists, and remember, I want to keep them all off the ground and out of the moisture to help extend the life of that ramp. I'll add a little bit more gravel there to the far side because that was a little bit low. Pack it down, and then use my 4-foot level just to make sure everything's lined up and the load will be evenly balanced at the end of that ramp. And then I'll use some Thompson's water seal spray here to seal up those cut ends. Remember, we just cut pressure treated wood, so that would be prone to rot, especially if you're sitting that on the ground. The gravel will give me a little bit more of a fighting chance, but that sealer will do a little bit more. Now we'll secure the ledger board back, checking everything one last time, and now we'll go ahead and put the rest of those screws through the ledger board. And then I have my rest of my decking boards here, which are just 2x4s cut to 64 inches. And you might want to lay those out ahead of time to make sure their spacing is correct. Mine worked out where I won't have a partial board where I'll have to rip it down to get that final space filled up at the top of the ramp. So a nice little DIY day build, and it is solid as a rock. It just makes your shed much more functional and way easier to get lawn equipment, wheelbarrows, whatever it is, into your storage shed. Now remember, that link is in the description with all the materials. That is something we're really trying to do at Everyday Shed, is give you that list of materials to help you save time and hopefully money with your own DIY builds at home. Let me know if that's helpful, if you guys are using it, or if you need anything else in terms of direction on your own projects. Now, if you want to see more on this 8x12 Home Depot shed kit, is it worth the money? Is it actually going to hold up to the test of time? Check out this video right here. I'll walk you through the complete build and give you my opinion. Then Carlos on this channel right here is putting together our custom build 8x12, but it's overall just a beefier design, costs less money, a little bit more labor, but at least you'll be able to compare and contrast. So you can check out this video right here and he'll walk you through everything you need to know, complete with build plans and additional resources to help you on your own project. So thanks for joining me on this one, and we'll catch you on one of those next videos. Take care.